to a great start. Okay.
Now we're going to record. So anything you say from here on out will be on record. Let's keep that in mind. First off, Emma, I don't know if you noticed I made you co-host because sometimes out here in the country, internet be bad. So in case something happens.
Heard that.
And then first off, I wanted to just start off with a little bit of housekeeping. So if I can get to it. If my scheduled email worked and it went all okay.
I just got it, Jess, if that helps.
Perfect. So I did send out the scheduled email. So according to the doodle poll, I looked and it looks like for discussing the astonishing color of after, we'll have our 2 meetings on Tuesday, March 9th at 6 p.m. and Wednesday, March 10th at 7 p.m. And then here are both links for those Zoom meetings. And then I've also included a Google form for our next book, which I thought I'd talk a little bit about here. We have The Water Princess, Eyes That Kiss in the Corners, Mirror, Sulway, and Hair Love. And I really specifically wanted to draw attention to Mirror. I included this on here because it is a wordless picture book. And it also included multiculturalism, of course. I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to that. And Eliza, thank you for being here. And whenever you are ready to get started.
Yes, I am ready to get started. I mean, it wouldn't be me doing anything if we didn't have some bizarre kind of get to know you activity. So that being said, I would love for you to introduce yourself and share your pronouns and also what is on your feet. Yeah. You could show us what's on your feet too, if you're so inclined, but you don't have to. I'm happy to start that. It was my idea. I'm Eliza Phones, and I'm an assistant professor. I'm in my second year at UNI, and I use she, her, or they, them. Any of those are just fine. On my feet are some hideous slippers. Oh, look at those. It's been around for a while. As my partner would say, they've seen a lot of life. That's what's on my feet. And maybe I'll invite one of our other faculty members to go next.
I can go next. My name's Carmen Durham. It's great to see some of y'all who I have in class in a more social setting. I'm really excited about that. And if I don't have you in class, then hopefully I will in the future. I'm a new faculty member here. I'm also an assistant professor. And I forgot the other things, but what is on my feet every time I'm teaching, if you didn't know, is some ugly slippers also. I should probably get some new ones soon, since that's all I wear these days.
I guess I'll go next. So I'm Hilal. I go with the she, her, hers pronouns. I'm also an assistant professor here, also my second year, like Dr. Phones, and I'm the advisor for the TESOL Club. On my feet are ankle-length socks, but I don't have the flexibility to raise my feet to the camera, and I don't want to take off my socks. I don't think you want to see that. Good to see you all. I really miss all of you.
I can go next. So my name's Kerrigan. I'm a senior TESOL major with a minor in Spanish teaching. I'm the public relations person for TESOL Club. I don't know if that's important, but it's out there. And I took off my sock because these are incredible and I think people need to see them. So for Christmas, one of my aunts got me a sock advent calendar, and the theme of it was everybody wants to be a unicorn. So these are pandas that want to be unicorns, and they have little tutus. So yeah, that's that.
Those are amazing, Kerrigan. I'm Sarah, she, her pronouns. I just got done with the teaching fair, by the way. I had a school district offer me a position and I didn't even meet with them. So Apparently they really want me in Roswell, New Mexico for some reason. Okay. My feet have my very nice black bobs that I've seen a few different places. They're really comfy. So yeah, that's me.
Forgive me if I'm wrong, but is Roswell not like where a UFO spotting was?
Yep. I told my dad that too, because so the guy left me a voicemail. Like he called me during one of so they had group sessions and one-on-one sessions. And I was signed up to do a one-on-one session with him, like right after, or a group session right after my first group session. And I was in the first group session, excuse me, and I get the call from public schools, Roswell, New Mexico. I'm like, why are they calling me right now? I'm meeting with them right after this. And I listened to the voicemail, and he said that he looked over my resume and he really wants to hire me for a job. That they'd pay me $2,000 to move out there, and that after a year, they would help pay for me to get a master's degree. So, I mean, if you're really interested in teaching in Roswell, New Mexico, they're the place to go, I guess. So fun information.
I mean, definitely the ups would be like aliens. Like, absolutely, I'm all about that. The downside is, I've never been to the desert, but I know they have too many scorpions for my liking. So much that it's like regular for people down there to go around their house, like, here's a scorpion. No thanks. Anyway, after that, I'll give you some more boring information. Yes, absolutely, Eliza. I'm Jess, she, her, hers. I'm the president of the TESOL Club, if you can't tell from my personality. I have nothing on my feet right now. I thought my dog was going to be on my feet, but he's currently fighting me for bones. So, fun fact.
Jess, I love your dogs.
They're annoying too.
Yeah, one of them scratched Jess today and she sent me a picture. Fun fact. My name's Emma. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm currently on the move, as I feel like I always am, but I'll show you my feet. Got some cute little tennies. That's it.
I can go next. I'm Mackenzie. I'm a freshman ed major TESOL minor, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I have some nice black ankle socks on.
Mackenzie, if I may ask, I'm really curious, how did you find our club in your freshman year? Did you look for us?
I think I just saw an email like sometime last semester, and I was deciding whether or not to add a TESOL minor. So I was like, might as well try it and find out, and I decided to add a TESOL minor.
Excellent. Welcome.
Thanks.
I'm Emily. I'm a TESOL and Spanish major, and I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm wearing black boots.
I can go next, but also Emily and bed.
No, I'm with my friends.
Okay.
And my feet are not on the bed.
Okay, I was like, how cold are you? Like, that's a new type of cold. Okay, my name is Marlon Jackson Alvazike. My pronouns are he, his, ales. And I have nothing on my feet.
I think I'm the last one. I'm Olivia. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a junior at UNI. I'm majoring in English education and TESOL. And I have Reeboks on my feet. Yeah.
Nice. That was great. See how much I learned about all of you? So wonderful. Thank you. All right. So I was invited to talk about a research project I'm working on currently. And what's interesting about that research project is that the idea for it came out of a course in the fall that I taught that I'd say maybe half of you were in. the level 3 practicum for TESOL. And so if any of this sounds entirely familiar, it's because that's what the idea was really born out of. And so I hope that that's meaningful to you. Certainly, I hope that it is a way for you to connect what you experience in the classroom to larger things that are going on. And so, yeah, I'll just take it away from there. Obviously, this is pretty informal. Some of you aren't even wearing shoes. So questions at any time. I am not probably going to keep an eye on the chat, so interruption is best. And so, yeah, I'll just go from there. Is there a time at which I need to stop talking, or if somebody wants to like give me the...
I technically set the meetings for like 3 hours. So, I mean, I doubt anyone would stay that long, but you have the floor.
You're out of control. Okay, great. Then I will hit the screen share and do this. Ah, you have to let me screen share. I took that so personally for a minute, like I can't share my screen. That's some faculty privilege right there.
Okay, you should be able to now.
Okay, thank you. All right. Oh, so also a quick update on campus grilling. I don't know if y'all checked your email, but the president wants everyone to review the guidelines on how to use your grills. I saw that and thought that was pretty funny. Okay, so here's what we're doing. This, until I come up with a very catchy acronym or something shorter, here's what I'm working with. What I'm calling this project formally is community-based online support for refugee students in Iowa, promoting equity in teaching and learning. And I'm going to unpack that a little bit. So, because right off the bat, I think community-based and online, wait, what does that look like? What does that mean? And then you'll also see how this project addresses both the teaching and the learning side of things. Whenever I present something, a couple of things are really important. One, that I'm clear on any terminology that might be new or unfamiliar. And then I've also got in the practice of either a land acknowledgement or something about my positionality, which is acknowledging my position, right? How my identity impacts the work that I do. So as I know, many of you are familiar with and already using, instead of English language learner, I use emergent bilingual. English learner and English language learner is still what is used in schools most commonly, but for a lot of reasons that I know we've talked about in my classes, emergent bilingual is a really good way to acknowledge students, not just as somebody who doesn't speak English or who is learning English, but really acknowledging that they have other languages and cultures. It's very asset-based, right? Looking at what a student brings with them. In this project, we'll talk about community-based organizations, also known as CBOs. And then an important distinction is also that there are ethnic community-based organizations. And so in the world of working with the refugee community, Iowa is a really great example because there are a number of community-based organizations that support refugee communities. And those community-based organizations are run by non-refugees, or in other words, somebody from Iowa originally, right? A member of the community. An ethnic community-based organization is when a member, either a refugee themselves or somebody else with immigrant origins, that those people are the directors and the leaders of the community-based organization. So Embark here in Iowa, in Waterloo and in Des Moines is a really good example of an ethnic community-based organization because the directors, the co-directors, staff, the board, et cetera, are members of the refugee and immigrant community. So you can imagine how a CBO and an eCBO would approach work differently, right? I also have a statement about my commitment to learning about and implementing inclusive and anti-racist practices. That work is never done. And I acknowledge my multiple privileges, and I also acknowledge the indigenous peoples whose land we occupy. The University of Northern Iowa is on occupied land of the Sac and Fox tribes, the Meskwaki Nation. Oh, I thought there should, I thought I included a link there. Meskwaki.org is a good place to go. You can find out about their language revitalization programs and other work that they do. Right. So tonight, some of you might just see the objectives and be like, oh, it's going to be like class. I assure you, it's not going to be like class. These are my objectives for what I'm talking to you about tonight, so I don't get on too many tangents. So I have an objective for this presentation, which is to describe the need for community-based practicum experiences for pre-service teachers of immigrant and refugee students, and to share my ongoing research in the recent grant to address these needs. The objectives for my work beyond that is that this grant and this project would help me help others design a sustainable and symbiotic model for community-based practicum experience with immigrant and refugee communities. That's the end goal. That's the project, is that we stop only training pre-service teachers in schools, that we think more broadly about community spaces, and especially, as I mentioned, in ethnic-based community organizations. So we'll talk about that more. And then my goal for your work is that you continue to explore the needs of pre-service teachers of refugee youth. You could think about what is missing from your preparation. You could think about what ideas you have or what opportunities you see to better do this work. So those are the goals. Okay. So again, I mentioned the title says both online and community-based, which could be a little contradictory, but I'll discuss a little about those two spaces, so to speak. So one thing we know from this pandemic is that students are already engaged in online learning, which has made online platforms more accessible, right? And it has made a lot of technology more available, if not necessarily more accessible. So if students are already online, right, online tutoring is in some ways a natural fit. Online tutoring also provides collaboration for communities that otherwise wouldn't be possible. So for example, where we are in Cedar Falls, we can only maybe in person interact with so much community. But once we do things online, we can start interacting with other people around the state. So I think it opens up some opportunities there. And then while online tutoring has challenges, talk to any of you who are in my fall class, there are also some real possibilities there for families where children and parents both maybe are working inside and outside of the home, right? I don't know if any of you have experienced this in other aspects of your work, but trying to get a hold of a student or a parent or a family outside of school, it can be really, really, really challenging. And so one possibility that this kind of work presents is the idea that we might be able to have better access to families and students we wouldn't otherwise be able to access. So importantly, also, there's a reason for community-based. There's a reason that I'm not just going to a school district and saying, hey, I want to do some online tutoring with you during school hours. The community-based part is really important. Once we get out of the schools, teachers can have different kinds of interaction with students. And my hope is that, and what a lot of research has demonstrated, is that those interactions can actually be more meaningful and they can be more positive. Once we are outside of the school, we can do things like get to know students better and get to know their families better. We can actually do that work of accessing funds of knowledge, for example, right? And then the other really important part is that the other thing research shows us is that pre-service teacher training that happens in schools very typically exposes pre-service teachers to those traditional power dynamics of a school setting, right? Where you have the predominantly white, monolingual, native English speaking middle class administrators and teachers who are in charge. And then you have this hierarchy, you have these power dynamics that leave out students of color, that leave out refugees, immigrants, their parents, and their families. So again, we're disrupting that. And we're showing pre-service teachers like yourselves, hey, there's another way to work with families that is more inclusive and that is more asset-based. So those are really big driving considerations for this work. This is some of that research that I mentioned, and I just thought that this quote captured it really well. This is just some of the research, but pre-service teachers' presumptions and biases were challenged in community settings. In classrooms, teachers often reinforced the deficits we hope to question. Community-based service learning offered opportunities to make real connections with adults and families from disenfranchised groups in ways not possible within classroom-based experience. So you'll notice this is from 2000, and this idea of community-based training for pre-service teachers is not new necessarily, but the idea of specifically doing it with immigrant and refugee communities is newer. The reason, but it's not as easy as it sounds, I guess, is the way I want to say this. The side that I'm not talking about as much here that we have to be really careful of is that when we take pre-service teachers into the community, we really have to be careful that we're not being voyeuristic, right? That we're not just there like, oh, let's look at this group of people that's really different from us, right? It's not just a one-off. We're not just going in and being like, okay, I'm here to volunteer for 5 hours this semester and then I'm done, right? So that's where I used earlier this idea of something sustainable and symbiotic. We as a teacher education program and as pre-service teachers have to think really intentionally about how are we contributing to the community, meeting the needs of the community, as opposed to going in with our own agenda, right? So again, this contributes to my thinking of why an ethnic-based community organization versus a school. Okay, this is a fancy visual I made. This is just one way to think about the different ways that this kind of project can have beneficial effects. One, right, so we've got that more reciprocal relationship going on between a teacher ed program and an ethnic community-based organization. At the university level, we need more options for practicum placements. And we also need a way to address not just the challenges of COVID placements, but more generally, anybody, I think, who's had the experience in an ELL setting knows that trying to find a really solid ELL teacher to place a pre-service teacher with for student teaching for level 3, 2, 1, et cetera, those are kind of hard to come by, right? So I think that we need to be more creative and more expansive with how we are placing teachers in the practicum and in the field. And then obviously for all of you and for pre-service teachers, we need more meaningful preparation and experience working with immigrant and refugee students, again, outside of the classroom, outside of the school setting, right? I think it's probably not new knowledge or a new idea to anyone that immigrant and refugee students don't do well in the K-12 school system typically, right? And so there are all of the reasons that sort of explain that I think are some of the reasons we can learn more about those students and support those students better outside of the school. This is some data. These are some quotes from the students from the level 3 practicum in the fall, when I asked them anonymously to talk about how they're prepared to work with immigrants and refugee students. And what I mean here is not to say that no one is ever prepared to do the work. I'm saying that there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect between learning about an immigrant community or a refugee community and actually interacting with that community in a meaningful way. And so some of these quotes from pre-service teachers at UNI really highlight that, right? I'm adequately prepared for the academic parts of teaching. However, the communication social part of teaching immigrant and refugee students is something I've never experienced before. The second quote mentions this idea of other life experiences that the students have. I think those are also really hard to learn about and interact with during a school day. And then the final quote talks about a lot of unprecedented challenges that can come with teaching a vulnerable population. And so anybody from the level 3 knows that, right? Here's an unprecedented challenge. How do you track down a kid that you haven't seen for a few weeks, that won't answer texts, whose parents don't answer emails, whose parents you can't necessarily call on the phone, right? There are so many, and that's one example, right, of the many, many challenges that come when there's a population that is so marginalized and is so vulnerable within a community. So I applied for a grant because I saw what we were starting to do in the fall practicum, and I thought, let's do that even better. Let's make that work. To do that, I need some money, right? And so that's where the grant comes in. So my goal was, again, to design and implement a sustainable model for online support of K-12 refugee students in Iowa, while simultaneously preparing pre-service teachers at UNI to meet the unique needs of their K-12 refugee students. So I'm really trying to do those two big things. How do we support students? How do we better prepare teachers at the same time? And the goal, again, is collaboration with community-based organizations that support refugee populations. And part of making it better than what we did in the fall means really being intentional about training pre-service teachers to work with refugee communities, having a partnership that facilitates the online tutoring. And the long-term goal, the thing that's a little bit harder to study, the thing that's harder to know if it's going to have any impact is, can we improve educational opportunities and outcomes for refugee students in Iowa? That's hard to know, right? That's a really big issue to tackle. Something I think that we can see maybe a little bit sooner is, can we prepare future teachers to do this work in an equitable and responsive way? So again, there's a real immediate need that we're trying to address, but hopefully as the demographics of Iowa continue to change, the school system continues to change, we're starting to change with that at a structural level, right? That we're changing the way teacher education prepares teachers, how the university interacts with ethnic community-based organizations, right? Those sorts of things. If you are ever in a position to try and get a grant, one of the most important things you have to do is explain why they should give you money, right? Explain what the need is and why it's so important. And so these are the ways that I articulated to the people giving me money why this is such a big deal. So the first thing that we're starting to see more and more research about is the idea that immigrants and refugees, but refugees especially, are some of the most vulnerable members of our communities and schools, and that all of the pre-existing educational disparities are now worse. They're heightened because of the pandemic, right? So let's take attendance, right? Attendance was an issue for refugee students prior to COVID. Now it's really an issue, right? English language proficiency, that was an issue before a pandemic. It's really an issue now, right? So all of these pre-existing disparities are getting worse. We can think really locally about Black Hawk, right? And these are the populations that refugee and immigrants in, not just in Cedar Falls, Waterloo, but I think in most of Iowa, I would say we see similar disproportionate representation. So if we think about the Asian population in Black Hawk County, which would include, right, the presence of the Burmese refugee community, it's only 2.5% of the population, but 20% of the positive COVID cases. Same with the Black population, that would include, right, not just African Americans in the population, but also immigrants and refugees from Africa. Over a quarter of the positive cases, despite being less than 10% of the overall population. And then perhaps most strikingly, the Latinx population with less than 5% of the population, but over 25% of the positive cases. So this again was part of how I was building the story and building the argument for why this is such a huge issue right now. So then when we think about the pre-service teacher side of things, I also needed to say why this was so important. And again, why they should give me money to do this work. So again, the need for experience interacting with refugee students and communities outside of school, I think is crucial. An awareness and understanding of the unique needs and experiences of refugee students, that's not currently present very many places. In a teacher education program, within the TESOL major, more so, but then think about your colleagues in general education, right? And then finally, I'm sure I put this in here because I thought Carmen might be here. No, I'm kidding. I had this in here from the beginning, but this is Carmen's wheelhouse is we need to prepare pre-service teachers to support our English learners with digital learning, right? That that is now something that everybody is realizing is where there's a big, there's a huge gap there, right? Technology in education is not new, obviously, but effectively leveraging technology to support emergent bilinguals is another real gap. So this was how I went about saying, that's why this is a big deal. I wanted to show you a little bit more of the specifics of what this project is going to look like, in case you're wondering, like, yeah, these are great ideas, but how are you going to do it? That's a very legitimate thing to be wondering. And so here is the chart. Out of here. Here's a chart. You can just look at the task part of things. So in the different phases, right? So starting now through June, these are the things that I'm doing, right? I'm establishing a connection, finding an ethnic community-based organization to work with. I'm also developing curriculum. I'm also thinking about, okay, what would it look like to really specifically focus on and train pre-service teachers to work with refugee communities, right? Being really intentional, not just being like, yeah, refugees are kind of like immigrants, but different, et cetera, right? But really focusing on that unique population. I also want to design a tutoring program, right? In the fall, in the practicum, it was like, do whatever you want to do when you talk to that student, right? Have conversations, read with them, help them with homework. I left it very open-ended. One of the things I wanted to do is design something that is more targeted, so that when pre-service teachers do this work, they have, kind of a program to follow, right? One of the ways I'm going to figure out if any of this works at all is with a pre-project assessment and then a post-project assessment. And I'm going to give that to pre-service teachers to find out, like, hey, did you learn anything during this? We're also going to give a pre and post assessment to the students that participate. Like, how did this impact your academic experience, if it did? And then importantly, we're also going to be asking staff at the ECBOs, what's your perception of students' needs when it comes to school? And was this an effective way to do that? One of the things specifically that I asked for money for was to create teaching and learning toolkits, right? We know that, or I think there's kind of this misconception that if it's online, you don't need anything else, but that's not true at all. So, I thought with some colleagues about what it would look like to provide toolkits for students with manipulatives and whiteboards and journals and books and different things. And then also to give pre-service teachers this kit of things that they can use when they're trying to tutor and work with students. Of course, I have to get human subjects approval to do research. That's really important. And so then it goes on to talk about the online tutoring sessions, how I'm going to be collecting some data, that sort of thing. And then more of the research side of things, because most grants want you to do something cool, but then the understanding is also that you're gathering data for research, so that if you're in a position like myself as a faculty member, I use that to present at conferences, to write articles and get published and that sort of thing, right? To make a larger impact in the academic field. So those are the specific things that I'll be doing with this. And so here are the questions that I want to leave you with. Obviously, we can talk about what questions you have for me, but when I think about all of you, when I think about pre-service teachers, if you haven't thought about this already, thinking about your preparation to work with immigrant and refugee communities. Also thinking about opportunities that you see in your work outside of schools. Do you see other ways or places that you could get involved with ethnic community-based organizations? And then also this grant and this project is just one idea out of infinite ideas about how to do this work. And so I also posed the question to you of what ideas do you have for improving educational opportunities and outcomes for immigrant and refugee youth? Yeah. And I will gladly share these, right? So you can all in your spare time just go over these slides, as much as you want. And yeah, I guess any questions that you have, I want to also give some acknowledgements, right? All of you in the level 3 TESOL practicum, you were unknowingly piloting this project, right? I didn't really know it either, but at the time we were trying something that would kind of like birth this bigger thing. And we worked with refugee students from the Des Moines Refugee Support Organization in Des Moines and their director, Allison Homan. You may know Ethan Vance. He was the one who actually had this idea and contacted me in the summer and said, hey, I think that we should have UNI students tutor refugee students from Des Moines. And I was like, sure. And you know, that's how it started. The Office of Research and Sponsored Projects gave me money. And then I have a delightful graduate research assistant, Bree Stainbrook. You might have her in some classes, who's helping me with this work. So I wanted to acknowledge all of that. Obligatory photo of my small humans. And I wanted to thank you. It's really nice to talk to students outside of class. It's really nice to talk about my research to an audience that hopefully isn't going to grill me, you know, or grill me, fine. But you know, it's nice to be able to talk about ideas in a warm environment. So that's it.
That's a very cute picture of your girls, by the way, Eliza.
Yes. Also, shout out to Aldi's for having grocery carts where you can put 2 kids in the front. Yeah. All right. So that's that.
Yeah.
One thing that I really wanted to talk about, it's not specifically a question, but rather a spur for discussion, was the idea of the challenges that we faced when we talked to these refugee students. And, you know, I was in that level 3 and I still think about it a lot because I think it took me like a month and a half to even like make solid contact with my student. And I think a lot of the idea of like challenges comes from like, well, students don't want to do it. And I'm going to be honest, if I was told that, oh, you're going to have this like tutor that you can contact, I would probably also just like bounce every once in a while, like, oh, I'm busy. Like, I'm going to be honest, I would be like that. But I think a lot of the other challenges comes through many other things that these students faced. Like, we were lucky enough that we got all the profiles for the students that we were with. And I had the oldest of, I think it was 3 siblings. And I knew that the people who were tutoring her siblings were able to get in good contact with those siblings and talk to them. Like it was going good for them. But I had the oldest and she did not have great contact with me. And a lot of that just came from the responsibility that she had in the household and like taking care of them. And then also like the actual, you know, place they lived, they did not have a very solid internet connection. When I was finally able to talk to her, like it wasn't great between us. Like it worked, but it wasn't great. And then there was just the wild schedule that she had with school because COVID, because they were there, but they weren't there sometimes. And there were just so many challenges that came with it. And I think it's really important to address like the variety of challenges that came with it.
Right. And not give up, because I think the reason that it finally got passed to us and to some random professor at UNI with her random students was because nothing else had worked, right? That nobody else had been successful either in reaching students and in supporting them academically, right? And even exchanging a text with them. None of those other things had worked, right? So that, yeah, the challenges are significant.
Professor, I have to say this is such an amazing idea. Thank you. I consider myself an immigrant since I was adopted. I consider that. And so this is really, really, really useful. And I love the overall idea of it, especially when we're talking about placement, is there's not a lot of options in Iowa, but there's a lot of TESOL students in Iowa. Why is it? You know, why is it that we cannot find good and productive placement for students, but we have all this immigrant population because of all this.
Did we lose him? Did he lose his connection? Yeah. Oh, you're back. Yay.
Maybe not.
Yeah, I think he's frozen again.
Poor Marlon.
I'm on the edge of my seat. Marlon, we lost you.
Yet another challenge, right?
Eliza, I have a question. So is this going to be next year for your practicum students? Is this going to be taking place?
Yeah, that's the
Yeah?
idea.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
Because I think I'm going to be in your practicum, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So one of the things I had to figure out was, right, where do I get the pre-service teachers for the pre-service teacher side of things? The practicum is a little bit obvious. And then the approaches class actually in the spring, right? So because I have to say that I wanted to really make sure that, again, it's not a one-off, right? That this is continued support that we're going to offer throughout the school year. And so what I'm imagining is that practicum students are given the option of continuing into the spring. And then if they are unable or uninterested, which is totally fine, we have students from the approaches class in the spring who are able to take that over. And again, part of the thing in the grant is I'm taking the time to plan a curriculum and to plan a program, that there's a way to do this, right? That there are orientation meetings and there are trainings. There's time for everybody to get to know each other, because I think, right, the other thing, as Jess mentioned, is, you're a 15-year-old and you get this random text from somebody who wants to help you with your homework, right? You don't know them. They don't know you. And so part of, I think, what was really missing in the fall that I hope to build into the program is these opportunities to really build relationships, to really build community. We know that that is so impactful in engagement and, in all sorts of things. So, Marlon, you're back. We'd love to hear the rest of your thoughts.
Right, sorry. Like I was saying, it's amazing that you built and expanded the placement, but you also created more opportunities for meaningful interaction. And to me, that's amazing, because I have a lot of friends who was like, where did you get placed? Marshalltown. So it's like, Marshalltown, the only TESOL qualified, really? And to me, and this creates opportunities. I do have a question, possible suggestion is there a way of working with other already organized groups? Meaning, I don't know if you heard of TRIO, but some of there is education community centers really deal with the immigrants and the refugees. And for me, I feel like I have to plug in my organization and to see if there's a way, with even possibly within a grant or partnering up with possibly, I know there's one in Waterloo, they're everywhere, but like possibly is selecting a specific one and saying, you know what, we may want to partner up with this on that trial basis and write that into the grant. Because I know grant cycles just, this is a grant, so they already have their grant, and I can see like a connection being built. And this is just me, just because of all my networking and all that. But I see this flourishing into such a beautiful relationship, because in a way I've done some similar stuff like that through different organizations, and I see the meaningful work that you're creating here in the partnership that the students are going to get after this.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. because right, the key word here is sustainable, I think. It has to be sustainable, right? And symbiotic. It has to be something that isn't just taking from communities, taking from community-based organizations, but is really, yeah, it can keep going, right? That's so cool. Thank you.
I'm really excited for like other people to also have the same opportunity that like we did in the practicum, because I'll admit it was frustrating at times, but like as frustrating as it was like one of the experiences I think I've learned like the most from, like just hanging out with like a fourth grader like once a week on Zoom, like trying to get stuff done. Like there's so much that goes into that, and just like the different, you know, experiences, like Jess said, like all of the different challenges that they're facing. Like this kid is like 10 trying to go through fourth grade in a pandemic online. He has like 3 other siblings at home. And so, yeah, it was just like super like informational, and as frustrating as it was, like it's one of the things that I'm like, this is like definitely one of the things that I've learned the most from. So I'm excited that other people are going to get to have that opportunity too.
Right. Yeah, my hope really is that for all of you who had that frustration when you're out in the field, when you're out working, you're in your student teaching, etc., somebody's like, yeah, we just can't get a hold of that person, and you're like, I'm on it. I got this. I can do it. I've done it before, you know. And also I think in that same way you can kind of cut off that, you could disrupt that whole narrative around they're lazy, they're not interested, you know, their parents don't care, all of those things that get wrapped up in not being able to contact a student. All of those assumptions get put in there, and they get put on fourth grade students, right? So I think, yeah, I know it was so frustrating for all of you, but hopefully I'm saving you future frustration, right?
I think with like the frustrations, like for as many of those frustrations as you get, like you will always end up with at least 1 or 2, like, yes, they finally get it. You get those happy moments, and those happy moments are why we get into teaching. And so it's worth it in the end for all that frustration. I mean, we wouldn't be here if we didn't want to teach. I mean, that's the end point. Like, we wouldn't be here if we didn't want to work with these students. So I think having somebody like Eliza point out, like, what I worked with immigrant and refugee students before I even wanted to go into teaching. Like, so Marlon, you pointed out Marshalltown. I'm originally from Marshalltown. I worked with their ELL department for about 4 months before I went into a teaching program. And they were the reason why I wanted to go into teaching. So seeing the frustrations of those students beforehand of going into teaching, it just, seeing those aha moments once they finally reached it, it just was truly inspiring for me to go into into the teaching field.
And this all reminded me, I definitely wanted to say when I was talking about all the challenges that there was absolutely nothing more rewarding than going through all of that, trying about like 10 different ways to get in contact with a student and finally breaking through. It was like the best moment of the whole semester. I was like, I did it.
Have you really tutored like in the level 3 practicum last fall, unless you tracked down like this every single student's sibling on like Facebook and tried to get a hold of them? Because that was absolutely what happened.
I also want to make sure it's clear that I'm really pro public school. I really am. I also am really realistic about the shortcomings. I'm really realistic about where funding and resources actually go. And so I really, you know, when I say that we need to do this work outside of schools, it's not to take away from the necessity of public education, right? Like right now, if you're paying attention with the state legislature and vouchers for private school and charter schools, and how even now, and this happened so much in Washington where I was before this, it is entirely understandable that what gets brought up in the discussion is the minoritized community saying, well, why would we keep giving money to public schools when public schools continue to underserve and fail students of color? So even, right, I see communities of color coming into the conversation around vouchers for students to attend private school and for charter schools, and that's, of course, entirely legitimate. However, are those minoritized communities going to be given the resources and the access to charter schools in the same way, right? The real thing we risk, and now I'm just totally using your TESOL Club as my platform, is that we really risk continuing this very tracking mentality, and we start opening charter schools that really turn into vocational schools, that turn into places where students of color go because there's no expectation that they're going to go on to higher education, right? There's some real history there. But anyway, all of that to say, back is, yes, public schools are really important, but we have to do better. And if one of the ways we can do better is going to communities, I think we have to do that. We have to explore those possibilities, right? What we're doing is not working. That was the whole reason I left teaching and went to graduate school, was because every day I was encountering the ways that the public school system was failing immigrant and emergent bilingual students. And I was like, there has to be a better way to do this. And I feel like that's still what is motivating me, is there has to be a better way to do it.
I have a question. How can we help or better advance, if any? Are there any ways you would recommend instead of just advocating for it?
Can you say a little bit more about what you mean by advance?
Meaning, basically, how can we help this grant, if any, on seeing some of its completions? I'm just thinking community-wise, like there are some really influential people who I think would love to hear some of this grant and potentially sign on to it at the state level. If you need some of that help. So saying like, also, is there a way we could work with you, or like, what do you need from us students besides, pumping it up for the potential next ones? Because I'm not sure we were able to go through this program. So, do you need us to hype it up? Do you need us to build up publicity? Like, personally or as a group, how can we help within this grant?
I think putting it out there for discussion, right? I think not just within like TESOL majors and minors and the TESOL Club. I'm not worried about any of you. I'm very worried about your colleagues in elementary education who don't get any coursework about this. I'm very worried about secondary education majors who are non-TESOL, who don't get any of this coursework. So I think the extent to which we keep bringing up the importance of this, and frankly, bringing up the failures to prepare teachers, is really, that's significant. I don't always know who institutions are going to listen to, but I would like to think it's students at some point, right? I think in terms of other support, as I'm speaking with all of you and hearing your ideas and knowing that you're excited about this, is I'm thinking about what it would look like to have this kind of network of support for the pre-service teachers who are working on the project. I'm thinking about how cool it might be if there were opportunities for the refugee students to interact with other college students, right? I'm thinking about panels. I'm thinking about what it would be like for less formal, like, so the non-tutoring side of things. So I can see some good potential for engagement there. I also really like this, and I borrowed it from another project I was working on, is that, say I have a pre-service UNI student who's working on this project and doing the tutoring, and they know and they're working with a student who is really, really, really into knitting. I love knitting, right? And then I know, okay, hold up, I've got this other person in my class who's very into knitting. Wouldn't it be neat if they could talk or exchange? All right. Or what if it's soccer? That's a huge one, right? In the Des Moines refugee community, is there's a really big push for involvement of refugee youth in local soccer organizations, right? So thinking about ways that we extend the support beyond academic and beyond language to social support, to activities, to other sorts of things like that. Rest assured, I have all of your names down and you'll be getting an email from me for sure, right? I think it's going to take a lot of people to make this work successfully.
I have a question, but before I ask it, can you go over like a little bit about what it means by the practicum? Because I'm like
Yes.
super early into the field, so I'm not really sure with everything.
Yes, it's wild. I'm going to tell you what I think it is, and then your peers maybe have a different idea. Is that there are different levels of the practicum in the teacher education program, and there are the first two, which are in some ways sort of more observational. They're less intense. There isn't as much direct teaching going on. But say you would have a level 2 practicum where you would be in a classroom for a certain amount of hours throughout a semester, doing a lot of observation, maybe some small group work with students, some shadowing of a mentor teacher and that sort of thing. Your junior or senior year, you do your level 3 practicum, which is the one that's more intense and it's specific to your area, right? And so if you're secondary education, which I know you're not, but if you're secondary education and you're going to be a math teacher, right, then your level 3 practicum is specific to math, and it's an intense experience where you are doing more of the direct instruction. And there's always a class that goes along with it. So it's not just, so your level 3 practicum is a class in addition to the experience that I'm describing. And then level 4 is your student teaching, which is a semester, your final field experience. So they're designed to build upon each other sort of and get more intense, right? At the elementary level, not to terrify you in any way, but I know that like the level 3s, you do it for different content areas, because as an elementary teacher, the expectation is that you need to be able to teach literacy and math and science, right, and social studies. So an elementary person is expected to have more experience with different content areas. As you've heard people talking about here, when it comes to TESOL, it's a real challenge because there aren't as many ELL teachers, and certainly there aren't as many good ELL teachers. Not necessarily even by the teacher's fault. It's the fact that the districts and the schools don't have good programs set up to support ELL students, right? Because I'm also not here to bash teachers. I'm here to say that the programs at a school or district level, it's really hard. It's really hard work. So that's how I understand the different levels. Nobody here would say anything that would scare Mackenzie, of course, but that's how I understand them, as different levels.
Okay, so it's the whole grant and like study project and everything that you're doing, that's within your practicum class, but then there's other professors doing their own. Okay. So
Yep.
then are you thinking that at one point you're going to want to like expand it to all of the practicums?
I love how you think. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Wouldn't that be so cool, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be so cool if this was something that could happen in, a science practicum setting, or even a PE practicum setting, right? That's one of the big things that in my, my meetings and the different committee work with the College of Education, I know people are thinking about it and thinking about how to do it, but right, we have to separate like class or this separate student, or, you know, that somehow not involved with the entire education process, right? Everybody is going to teach emergent bilinguals. That's just not even a question anymore. Everybody's going to. And so everybody needs to be prepared to.
Can you clarify, in your proposal, how do you have this set up? Is it just practicum only at first, or how?
So for that phase, right, phase 2 of the project, right, it will be fall semester and spring semester. And in fall, I have the practicum, so that's how I'm going to do it. And then in the spring, it would be with my approaches to language learning and teaching students, because I feel like that's a good fit with the content. But offering those practicum students the chance, like, do you want to continue working with those students for the whole school year? It was one of the things I'm less excited about, right? I'd rather have a partnership where there's a pre-service teacher and a K-12 student for the whole school year. But I can't require somebody from the practicum setting necessarily to keep doing that work through the rest of the school year. And so I thought, well, we can transition it the best that we can, you know, and be really intentional about how we maybe hand off. A student was working with so-and-so, and then they're going to continue the work, right? We'll be thoughtful about how we do that. But that is, I think, one of sort of the design issues, because otherwise I don't have yet, right, a sustainable group to draw from, right? Where I can say, every year I know that I'm going to have these 20 pre-service teachers who are going to do this, right? And maybe, as Mackenzie was just saying, right, if this actually gets picked up and built into UNI's teacher ed curriculum, right, then maybe this becomes something that is built into more coursework besides just mine. And, you know, it could take different shape, but for now, what we're looking at is those 2 courses, students from those courses.
Okay, because my mind is thinking, it's expanding and blowing this up, because I was thinking if there was a possibility with the College of Ed of having specific coordinators, because that's the representative between the school liaison. So I can see at first having a group of possibly 2 to 3 coordinators, because with the practicum, especially in the first and second, is, do you want to do this? And I see more of just helpfulness of, you can have the advanced students working with the students, but also you can have the coordinators with practicums level 1 or level 2 observing it, thus building you're creating a self-sustaining system and building that. And there's more attention to that student, because research has shown, once again, is the students of refugee and immigrant students, especially when it comes to language, the more practice you have, the better. The more attention you have, the better. And I can see where certain coordinators would be cool. Let's try this, because I know, again, it's the problem with placement is not only level 2s or level 3s, it's all around, right? Like, what are you going to do? Observe. Okay, so why can't you observe in a refugee setting that first, I would say, would be more beneficial than just sitting around where in a not a very efficient curriculum or department at that school.
Right.
It's just food for thought.
Yes, absolutely. I like this. Right, because what I hear a lot of, and which I understand why this happens, is I hear a lot of, oh yeah, I think there were a couple kids in the class at my level 2 who maybe were immigrants, and that's it, right? There isn't anything beyond that. That was never taken up in any other way. So this, you know, what we're talking about with this project is bringing the focus specifically to those students, and not just like, oh yeah, I think maybe there were some refugees at that other school I was at that one time, you know? Yeah, cool.
And I think kind of going off of what Marlon said, if you expand it into like other practicums, like this need isn't going to go away like ever. But well, okay, theoretically, eventually, hopefully things will kind of be better, but like it's not going to go away anytime soon. Like my little kid
Do you mean after the revolution, Kerrigan, right?
Yes, absolutely. At
Okay,
that
cool.
point. Yeah, because like I'm just thinking like my little kiddo that I was with in the practicum, like in the fall, he will like still message me every once in a while and just ask me like little homework questions. And it's just so cute and it makes my heart happy every time. But I'm just thinking like if every kid is gonna do that, like that could be sustainable for like quite a while, just based on like not even a huge group of kids.
Yeah. One of the things too, this is, the details of this specific grant. This is an internal grant from UNI, and one of the things that I have to do is I have to apply for more grants, right? So UNI is giving me this money, being like, okay, don't mess up, right? But also, we think this project has worth, and we want to see you start it. We want to see you get it off the ground, and then we want to see you go get more money to do this. So, so it's totally appropriate that we think expansively, and I love the creativity. I love the optimism. I love this. I think this is the other thing that happens when we think outside of schools and thinking outside of programs. We start getting these ideas for possibility.
One thing I really want to rant about, which is a little slightly off topic, but I got to thinking about it when we're talking about like including all these other like elementary ed people and everything. That was kind of our focus really for this year for TESOL Club, is we really want to be inclusive of all of the, education students, all pre-service teachers. It can come across as really frustrating though, from both my roommate, who is early childhood, that's it, and then a secondary math teacher. And both of them have told me on different accounts, oh, I got an email about TESOL Club or whatnot, and they're like joking about it. And I'm like, yeah, you're gonna have emergent bilingual students in your class, and they both go like, oh, because I'm like, yeah, I'm the one that sent it. What? I just needed to bring that up. I need to talk about it.
Mackenzie, make us look really good. Hype us up.
Got it. I'll work on it.
You are like our poster girl for elementary.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm a non-TESOL major. Actually, I was an English major. Now I'm just an English major. But I'm a TESOL enthusiast. So I have to ask this. TESOL is top down, right? K to 12. It's not like post-secondary, right? Why is that? Why like, meaning, why was the curriculum developed being exclusive while others have not? I'm just curious.
So you're thinking about the licensure itself, right? Yeah. From the State Department of Education. Yeah, I don't know. Well, I don't know if you know this. Most states in the US, the ESL endorsement is K-12. And I think what it reflects is this idea that it's an additional thing. It's a thing you add on, right? It's never the only thing that somebody does as a teacher. It's always considered as this extra, right? I was once at a program for student teachers, and somebody was there to talk about special education and ELL. And they're like, imagine a Christmas tree, and the ESL endorsement is like an ornament you put on your Christmas tree. And like, I was ready to like flip a table over. But that's what you're seeing, is you're seeing from the state level all the way down to teacher education, all the way down to schools and classrooms, is that it's viewed as this sort of add-on thing. And because it's an add-on, it's not seen as needing as much of the curriculum. You don't need as many credit hours. You don't need as many practicum hours, those sorts of things, right? Unless you're the major. UNI is really unique in that regard, right? So again, I don't worry about our TESOL majors, right? I worry about everybody else who's not having the coursework. What I think UNI could do a much better job of, and that I think we'll get there, is that the ESL endorsement needs to be available for students regardless of a TESOL major or minor, or we need to wrap it into something, right? Because you're absolutely right. It shouldn't be that way. And the more we make it inaccessible for students, right? Because I've heard that from so many folks, like, I want to do this, but I don't want another minor. I can't add another major. I can't pay for it. I don't have the time, right? And so as long as it keeps getting presented that way, nobody's going to do it, right? Some teacher education programs in the country have started embedding the ESL endorsement for all student teachers. Anybody going through getting a teaching degree is going to get an ESL endorsement.
Right. And like from just to like complement that answer, I think from a more applied linguistics perspective, there's this faulty understanding that the best way for ELLs to learn English is to throw them in classes, and immersion is going to eventually teach them. It could not be further from the truth. It's really bad for the students. You really like just you play ping pong with their psychology, basically doing that. But somehow this comes from all the way back from the 60s and 70s, when people thought that second languages are learned just like first languages, and you just expose the student to it, and all of a sudden it just comes back out. It just doesn't work that way. We know that now. But the thing is, research, I mean, mainstream education catches on to research about a few decades late. And that's where we are now. We know it's wrong. Practitioners don't necessarily, administrators don't.
Okay, thank you. Because for me I feel like this conversation then needs to be advanced with some of the College of Ed administrators is saying, let's expand this. And I have a meeting with them coming up, so I'll add this to my tenure to talking points. So thank you. So yeah, because I was really curious, because I didn't realize that. I always thought this was a secondary thing, but this is so much more useful and so more applicable. Like literally just made your grant or your proposal even that much more, because there's more applicability through K through 12 instead of just stopping at 5th or starting at 7th or whatever.
And a good program would also recognize that you, Mackenzie, and you, Marlon, like, you need different instruction and understanding for an emergent bilingual who's K5 and an emergent bilingual who's 612, right? Those are really different ball games. And so that's the other thing too, that we could think about, as Hilal was mentioning this, how language learning happens, and just even the differences in the school system and what's expected of students, right? So there's a real big, I think, I'm glad that my presentation was able to bring these questions and ideas up, because all of you are just absolutely on point.
One thing that I've been kind of reading about too, so I'm working on my honors thesis right now, and that's kind of like what the whole topic of my thing is about, is just like including like ESL, not like an ESL endorsement necessarily, but just like more like content about emergent bilinguals just in like general teacher education curriculum. And one thing that I've been like reading about as I've been doing research is there's kind of like the mindset that like, oh, if you just teach people to be like good teachers, then they can like teach emergent bilingual students. And as I'm like interviewing people and like looking at all this stuff for my thesis, like it just is like everywhere. And it's like, sure, you can be a good teacher and like figure stuff out, but like you can also just learn how to do those things and not have to be a good teacher and figure it out by yourself, I think. And I think that's still kind of where things are like disconnected.
Right, that it's just good teaching, right? And unfortunately, that's how it gets sold, right? That's, when we think about districts or schools or even teachers, unfortunately, who are not interested in doing this work or learning more about it, we have to like make it more interesting for them. Like, oh, these are strategies you can use with everybody, right? As opposed to, no, you need to have really solid understanding of how somebody learns a language, of how language works, right? All of those sorts of things. So yeah, that is, Kerrigan, that's really fascinating that that's come up in your research. It's very real. I saw Jess's dog.
They're so big for how old they are. Like, I'm shook every time I see them.
I've been fighting with them all this whole meeting. Yep.
Yeah.
I've just confused them. Here's Nikki. And Winston. We really derailed that conversation real fast. I'm sorry, Eliza.
I think I was the derailer. I think my attention span's probably about done for the day.
As I say quite a lot, it's been a day.
It's been a day. And I understand you guys are going to keep going until about 10. That's cool. But I'm gonna go. Thank you all so much. This is just wonderful. Definitely I will stay in contact with all of you. And thank you for the ideas, the discussion, the questions, the enthusiasm. That means a lot.
Thank you, Eliza, for the extra time.
Yeah. All right. Everybody have a really good evening, really good rest of your week. See you. Thank you.
Thank you, Eliza. Oh. Well, noped out of there.
Yes, it was amazing. Good. Whose idea was that? Was that yours or was that mine?
Oh, it's you that said we should get professors in here. So I was like, oh, Eliza.
Oh, yeah, okay. No, yeah, for real. Like, this was amazing.
It was a good, yeah. It made me sad every time like someone left. It was like, no, there's still stuff to talk about.
Yeah, it's like we're the last survivors. Also, where's Mackenzie?
Oh, she has tutoring till 8 tonight. So I guess till like 20 minutes ago, but yeah, she couldn't make it. I am so sorry, Marlon.
No, for real. I don't know. Cool. No, but this was awesome.
Yeah.
Like I thought this was gonna be very doctoral. Like we're looking at the, something linguistically. But no, like this is I just want to help with this. So please keep us in the loop if any way. And also I would say we would write some sort of memo for the future TESOL club saying here may be a partnership opportunity in volunteering with it, or whoever. I'm calling Mackenzie being president. I'm just calling
Mackenzie's only a sophomore, so I think she'll be here for another 2 years.
So I would say, or because eventually in my mind I'm thinking it would be really cool to just have whatever this project's name is, have that at night. Just having having some sort of games with the participants of this program along with the TESOL club, or having like some sort of fundraiser going for those students or for an event of celebration, something like that. So saying just and possibly even writing that in somewhere grant is, let's say, I don't know, I'm just calling grant night, meaning we're gonna do something. We're either gonna have a fundraiser or we're gonna have them and treat them as, almost like the CIEP, how they have like a graduate, something like that, only TESOL version of it. And I would say whenever we do funding, we may write up for that. And so, pass it down the line for it, because I can see this being such a success and a very cool thing for TESOL Club to promote.
A few things to say about that. I feel like Eliza's that kind of person that I think she would reach out to the club. It's hard for me to say. Kerrigan, you're also a senior, right?
Yeah, I'll be
you're
student
honor
teaching
students,
next
of course.
semester.
Wow.
So like most of us are going to be like gone. So it's really hard to say and plan for the future. But like you said, Mackenzie will be here. And I pray she'll stay on the board because, she kind of
That girl does everything. I'm sure she'll stay.
She's so
does
annoying.
all the things.
So I feel like on that end, I think Eliza would definitely seek help in that way. Second of all, the issue with like doing this kind of activity nights, which I think would be super duper fun. Like I mentioned though, it's hard enough to like contact a student for half an hour during the day. Like it took me, I was being generous saying a month and a half. I think it took me longer than that just to get a Zoom meeting with this student. It's super rewarding,
like,
but it's so hard though. And it'd be hard to get that going.
In the way I can see
it took,
like doing, not to interrupt, more like a spaghetti dinner and whatever we raise or whatever, like, yay, good for the grant. Like a grant celebration, it doesn't have to have them there. It can have like Eliza or some of the community members who are participating, or even some of the students who are actually working with them, the college students, like celebrating that. So either way, I just want a celebration.
Yeah.
Something like that. I feel like that would be really cool. But, it's wishful thinking, but at the same time, looking for the future and planning for the future.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to peace out because I have some stuff I need to finish and I want to go to bed early. So,
yeah, I have a whole class I need to do. It's fine.
Yeah, I have a quiz.
You're driving.
Actually, I have a test.
It was so worth it for this, though. This was good.
Yeah.
It was. This was fun.
I'm gonna stop recording.
All right.